Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom, where we bring you engaging conversations and respectful disagreement across the social spectrum.
Injected with the quirks of everyday life.
Curl up as we navigate the complexities of this modern world with all the humor and warmth we can muster.
And the occasional gentle ribbing. We're glad you're here. Happy listening.
Do you ever look back at something you knew you were right about, like deep down in your bones, you were so sure about, only to cringe because not only were you loud, you were also wrong? Yeah, today that's what we're talking about, that feeling.
Yeah, from the peak of Mount Stupid to the slow climb up the slope of enlightenment, we're unpacking why confidence often shows up before competence and how experience humbles us in the best ways.
Because real wisdom isn't about knowing it all. It's about knowing better. Let's talk about fear, ego, and the messy, beautiful journey toward understanding. We're unpacking why so many people start off overly confident, only to get humbled by reality, and how real experience leads to less fear and more wisdom. From the Dunning-Kruger Effect to the question of destiny versus decision-making, this episode explores how we grow when we trade ego for understanding.
Ooh. Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom. I'm Callie.
I'm Cole.
And I'm Mom.
So this week we're talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect to a certain extent. And all of this kind of got brought about by a line that I had heard from Simon Sinek, who says, as you gain experience, you lose fear. And Mom really didn't agree with that. And I understand her point because I think it is kind of a good example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. But there is another, there's a deeper aspect to it than just, oh, my confidence goes down as I gain experience. Eventually, that confidence starts to regrow. And most Dunning-Kruger models that you see, that level of confidence never really gets back up to that peak from when you don't really know a whole lot. You just know a little bit about a situation. But I think in general, both are kind of true to a point.
But Mom really took issue with it. Mom, where do you stand?
Well, my issue is that I don't think you really lose fear just from experience. Here's my example. I'm not going to go learn a new athletic ability. Let's say snow skiing at my age, because I know it's going to hurt. If I screw up, I know it's going to hurt. So I'm not going to jump into that. So,
but that's kind of beside the point though, because you don't have any experience snow skiing. If you went and gained experience snow skiing, you would not have that same level of fear because now you have experience and have gotten more comfortable with it.
Unless I break my leg.
I understand, but you have to gain the experience for the phrase to be true. And in your example, you're not gaining any experience.
Okay. I see where you're going.
And you can't take and use learned experiences from adjacent things. Like Mom used to water ski routinely.
Yeah. And I'd go water ski today.
Oh, you would?
Yeah.
But snow skiing is where you draw the line.
No, because don't think I'd break my leg water skiing, and I'm pretty sure I would snow skiing.
Why?
I don't know. I guess I took a lot of falls water skiing that I survived.
Yeah, but how long has it been since you've been water skiing? 32 years?
Maybe.
Oh, goodness. Oh, man. So
I would still go water skiing today if somebody said, here are the skis, let's go.
Because you have experience and therefore more confidence.
And less fear.
Okay, fine. Whatever.
So let's talk about the confidence paradox of all of this. Why beginners do often feel much more certain than experts, and how experience tends to reduce both the fear and the ego that comes with knowing something.
Yeah. So I can speak to this a little bit because this is when I really kind of started to learn about the Dunning-Kruger effect for the first time. And it was a couple of years ago when I was starting to get some of the licenses that I needed for work. And I was learning about trading option contracts. And option contracts are something that just kind of immediately clicked in my head on a very base level. And I was like, oh, these are really cool. And so I started learning more about them, and I started learning a little bit more about them and a little bit more about them. And I was like, oh, I'm going to nail this. This is going to be easy. Like I understand these. And I started trading them and not doing very well. And so I started to learn more about them. And as you once you kind of take that next step to get a deeper understanding, that's when a lot of people, you start running into these videos and these articles where people have been in that same kind of situation, and they start referring to the Dunning-Kruger effect. And then you see a chart of the Dunning-Kruger effect and you're like, oh yeah, okay. Because options are simple enough that you learn a little bit about them and their basics, and you're like, oh, this is really cool what you can do with these. And then you learn a little bit more about them and you're like, oh, these are much, much deeper waters than I thought they were. And I didn't know how much I didn't know. And then I started to learn more and more and more. And now I'm in a position where I would probably be considered a subject matter expert, and I still don't have the same level of confidence and options that I did then, but I have more than I did in that middle area, because now I know what I don't know and I have increased what I do know. At the beginning stage, I didn't know what I didn't know. So it's hard to lack that confidence because you think you know everything.
I think it's fascinating that with Dunning-Kruger, even as your expertise grows, you never get quite to that same level when you're that novice going, I get this, I know this. You never quite get back up to that level.
Because you start to realize you can never know it all.
Yeah. I'm glad you told us where that came from, because I'd never heard of the Dunning-Kruger before you started talking about it. And you talk about it so casually
Regularly.
that I thought, I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what this is. And so I do think you should probably just briefly go over it, what it is.
Well, I mean, it's just that. It's essentially an S curve on an X and a Y axis. And so if you're looking at an X and a Y axis, on your X axis running horizontally is your level of experience. On your Y axis running vertically is your level of confidence. So as you move further right on the scale, as your confidence grows, very, very early on, there's an exponential gain in your confidence as you start to learn about a subject, and it maxes out almost at full confidence. And then you learn just a little bit more. You move just a little bit further right on that scale, and your confidence falls off of a cliff. And it
Because you
goes
figure out you don't know nothing.
that you don't know everything.
You've
You figure out,
summited Mount Stupid.
yeah, you've summited Mount Stupid, and then you start the very, very, very slow climb up the slope of enlightenment. And that is a much more gradual curve until it caps out, never really as high as your initial confidence was. And it takes a much longer time to get anywhere near that. But your confidence does eventually start to grow again as you become more and more of an expert on the subject, because not only, like I said earlier, do you learn more about that topic, but you also understand better what you don't know.
Why do you think our confidence shoots up automatically?
Ego. And I think that is,
Yeah.
I think it's probably biological that you
Oh,
wouldn't ever gain that experience if you didn't have that kind of early onset jolt of confidence. So, like,
that makes sense.
thinking about it evolutionarily, maybe you wouldn't have hunted that mammoth if you didn't have that confidence that didn't really belong. Maybe you wouldn't have figured out how to plant seeds if you didn't have that level of confidence, because the first farmers weren't successful 100% of the time, but eventually they figured out how to be more successful over time, and that took generations to figure out.
Do you think age has anything to do with this? Because I feel like, kind of going back to Mom's water skiing thing, when you're young and dumb, which I didn't make that saying up for the record, But when you're young and dumb, especially when it comes to physical activities, you tend to be a lot more invincible in your brain than you are as you're older. So if somebody came up and said, hey, do you want to go snow skiing at 16? That answer is going to be a lot easier to say yes.
Well, you're
Okay,
a lot
fine.
closer to being invincible at 16 than you are at 30. Your body heals a whole lot faster at that age.
Closer, but not invincible.
Right, but you're a lot closer to being invincible. So when you don't have the knowledge to know that you're not, when you don't have the experience to know that you're not, and comparatively, you're much closer to invincible than the older people in your head because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
You're gonna think you're invincible.
Yeah. I think with mine, it's just that experience. You know that fall's going to hurt. And so you just think, do I really want to do that and know that it's going to hurt? And when you're young, you're not even thinking about that because you've never experienced the fall.
Just wonder if there's a factor of this that can be attributed to age and the stupidity of being young. I don't know any better yet, so I am much more confident that everything is going to work out and be great and not be painful, and I'm not going to die or break my leg. And
I
then
think
once you experience a little bit more of life, you're like, oh,
that
I should
is the
question.
Dunning-Kruger effect, though.
Yeah.
It's
Let's
on a
go from,
broader application instead of
Yeah.
talking about one specific thing. But no, I think you're absolutely right. I'm sure there's a correlation to age. The younger you are, the more risk prone you are
Right.
because
and
you oftentimes don't understand the consequences of the risks you're taking.
Right.
let's think about reading. When you're a kid and you're just learning how to read a book and you get so excited because you know these words and you're learning these words and you think, I'm doing this. This is the coolest thing. But if you sat down and gave them the Constitution to read at that age,
Or
they
they run
wouldn't.
across the word vivacious.
Yes. And so I think age has a lot to do with it sometimes. But I think even somebody my age can get overzealous on what they think they know.
Sure. I mean, I think that you could probably illustrate every person's life as a series of Dunning-Kruger scales, a large Dunning-Kruger scale that has a very tight correlation to their age, and then
Mm-hmm.
dozens, if not hundreds, of smaller scales for every skill or thing they've ever learned about in their whole life.
Yeah, I can see that. I think the other thing with the Dunning-Kruger, though, that I read about is that people, once they've achieved that high scale, and even though their confidence level isn't up, they kind of forget that everybody else doesn't have that level. And so, when I first went to work, I went to work for a communication company and they had trained the scientist after 3 Mile Island. And it was because the scientists couldn't speak to the news people in layman's terms. They were so up here. And that's part of that effect is that they forget that they're up here and they have this big knowledge base. And I've seen myself do that. I mean, I think we all do that. I mean, Cole, you can talk about some of the subjects, whether that be stocks or firearms or whatever it is, and you've got that level, and I'm still sitting down here on the bottom of it, and I don't always understand exactly what's being said. So I thought that was interesting that that's a part of that too. Is that it's not just that you don't gain your confidence, but it's that you don't recognize everybody else's lack of being with you.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. I also think I go back to kind of what I said in the intro. Have you ever looked at something like I'm going to use this analogy just because it hits close to home for me. Our dad is a woodworker and is a good
Carpenter.
one. And so I can sit here and watch him doing things or watch him building something. And there have been a few occasions, I've learned now, but there have been a few occasions where I'm like, I could do that. Well, and I certainly wouldn't do it that way. I would do it this other way. And then you go to actually execute something and you're like, what the heck was I thinking? I have no idea what I'm doing. This is why he was doing it this way. I'm way off base here. And so I think that it's just so fascinating. It's really easy. And I'm going to go back to our brains lying to us because that's one of my favorite things. I think that we in our heads get in our own way. Oh, that's easy enough. I could do that. I mean, how often, Cole, are you doom scrolling something on TikTok and you're like, oh, I could do that. But how often do you actually go out and do it?
Not as much anymore.
Yeah. And so I just think that we have to allow ourselves a little bit of grace, if you will, to say, hey, I'm probably not as good at that as I would like to think that I would be.
You said that, and I thought, oh, you've just hit the highlight of the difference between men and women couples because, vice versa. We're looking at the other one thinking, that's not the way to do that.
Oh, for sure.
You shouldn't do it that. And we really maybe don't know
Don't have a
how
clue.
hard that really is, how involved that really is. I just was cracking up inside because I'm thinking, oh, well, there's the highlight of half of our arguments.
I mean, I just think it's so easy to overestimate your own competence until you get your hands dirty to do something. And then you're like, I was so wrong. So
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
But
So I wanna say thanks to everybody who interacted with our video this week and left a comment. We really appreciate that engagement. But there was a user, not that Andrew, who had a little bit of a stipulation on the Dunning-Kruger effect, and I'm not so sure that I agree with you, Andrew. He had said, those who don't believe in this effect most likely work in a skill-based job. This model is for intellectual matters like anthropology, research-based exploration, not welding. And I don't think I agree with you, Andrew, because
I don't think I agree
I've
either.
met plenty of welders who hadn't been welding for very long who really thought they were hot shit, and they were not.
yeah.
Well, and I don't think it comes down to intellectual versus manual. It can be the same
I think
thing.
it's
Think about your
just
driving.
experience.
I mean,
Yeah.
put a 15-year-old in the car the first time, and they've sat in the back seat and watched their mom and dad drive. They know how to do this. And then they get behind the wheel, and it's totally different when you're having to, navigate and look in different directions and multitask all of those things. So I don't think it's really an intellectual thing as much as it's a task that you have to
Human thing.
learn how to do.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting talking about welders. I work with a lot of them, and you can tell very quickly a good welder from a new welder and
Yep.
how smooth the beads are and lines are and their comfort level with what specific material they're working on or the questions in which they ask. Oh, what gauge is that steel? What does this mean? And somebody who's new to it doesn't have a clue. And so you're like, why does that matter? Why do you care? Because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I will say this whole talking about knowing what you know and don't know, it feels very like who's on first.
A little bit, yeah. But I think that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Is like the first time if you listen to that skit the first time, you're like, what are
What
these
is
guys
going on?
talking about? What is happening here?
Yeah.
And then you listen to it again or you read through it again, and then you start to be like, oh, okay. And you still like eventually you figure out who is, but you
Right.
still don't really know who is.
No, it's just a whole bunch of chaos and managing within it.
Yeah.
But
It cracks me up that y'all are using that as an analogy because that thing is older than I am. That's
Hey,
good.
some things just work.
I know what I know.
Okay.
Okay. So I want to throw out a couple of things here and talk about how does experience build a more grounded sense of control?
You're more aware of the possible consequences to many of the actions you can take. So you're more aware of what you are unaware of to attempt to account for that. I think that's how I would word it.
Okay. And then the next one is fear often comes from uncertainty and imagined risk.
Yeah.
Okay, here's my really weird thing. Mom, close your ears. So here a while ago, I smoked a joint, marijuana. And I remember sitting there. In my personal opinion, it is the worst part of being high. I sat there in total paranoia mode going, if the ceiling fan falls down on me right now, how am I going to get to the hospital? I can't drive myself to the hospital. And imagining, well, what if I were to get up and move somewhere else, like so that the ceiling fan isn't over me? Well, what if I fall and break my leg on the way? And all of this weird sense of paranoia that came in, and you're just like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die right here, right now. I'm not really sure of what, but I think I'm going to die. And then you kind of doze off and you wake up later and you're like, what an idiot I was. The ceiling fan is fine. But it just talking about that imagined risk. I'm laying in bed perfectly still, wondering how I'm about to die. Like, it was so ridiculous. And so I think that because I didn't know how to be stoned. And so when you don't have any concept of this, that fear in and of itself grows into this big, huge, scary monster. And you're just like, I have no idea what is going on. And so I'm thinking of the worst case scenario. Okay. I'm going to ask you another ridiculous question, and I would like a very specific numerical number from both of you. If you are packing to go on a trip, your trip is going to last 5 days. How many pairs of underwear are you bringing?
10.
If you're going commando, we don't want to know. So I understand the silence.
5.
So there's this whole thing about
What if you hit a bump? What if you
We are
go
back to this conversation, aren't we?
What if you go to a restaurant and it doesn't agree with you and you don't make it somewhere in time? What if you are going on a hiking trip and you have to cross a river?
I don't think women think this way.
Okay, well, see, that's the thing. I am normally in agreement with you on this, Mom, but in packing for a trip, even women who don't wear underwear, pack 3 times as many pairs of underwear as they would ever logically need because of imagined risk. This is a known thing. There are all kinds of goofy videos on the internet. It's like, hey, we're getting ready to pack. Okay, we're going to say how many pairs of underwear everyone brought for a bachelorette weekend. What if you get hit by a bus? What if
So you're saying to me
laugh
that if
so
a woman
hard?
is packing for 5 days, she's going to take 15 pairs of underwear with her?
Yeah.
That's a little much.
It's also not uncommon, though.
Outlier.
You are the outlier. And Cole, you also shocked me with your answer.
I mean, so the reason I say that is because if I'm going on a 5-day trip, I'm probably going on a 5-day disc golf trip. And when you go and you play disc golf in the mountains, you get real sweaty and real dirty real fast.
Yeah.
So if I'm playing 1 round a day, I'm going to need at least 2 pairs of drawers.
Yeah. I do think that's dependent on what you're planning on doing.
I think that it is dependent on what you're planning on doing. I think that that's fair. But I will also say this. There have been several instances, like since this has been brought to my attention via the internet and social media, that as I'm packing for something, I'm like, you're not going to wear all of those. Just leave them here. And not one
I also like to have
time.
options.
Right. But not one time have I been disappointed that I didn't have 15 pairs of underwear.
Yeah, that's a little excessive. Like, I went to Colorado Springs a few weeks ago for 3 days, Thursday, Friday, and we flew back on Saturday morning. So we left early Thursday morning, so 2.5 days. I brought 5 pairs of drawers with me because I knew that we were going to be up in the mountains, get sweaty playing disc golf. I also knew that we were going to be playing the disc golf the whole time, but I also brought like a decent polo shirt and a pair of jeans in case we decided we were going to go somewhere nice. And then we did go somewhere nice, and I wore basketball shorts anyways.
Oh, now, if you ask me that kind of deal, I mean, how many outfits I'm going to take with you, that's going to be 15.
Goodness.
Because you want to have options.
I
It
get
depends on
that.
what, especially if you have any likelihood of doing anything impromptu.
Yes. So I would
Goodness.
overpack for that, but maybe not underwear.
But I like to be prepared for as many situations as possible.
Okay, bring us back to the Dunning-Kruger, please. I'm tired of talking about underwear.
I was talking about pants and shirts, but
Yeah. Where's your head?
Drawers.
Goodness. Head in the drawers. Okay.
I think we go to the peak of Mount Stupid.
I hope I'm not at the peak of Mount Stupid anymore.
I mean, there probably are a few things.
That's no. I hope I just haven't even started up that mountain
Yeah.
on all of the things that I haven't crossed that peak on.
Oh, okay.
I hope that I haven't even started up that slope.
So let's talk about that journey to the peak of Mount Stupid, from a position of knowing nothing to knowing better, and how that journey from straight up ignorance to even decent knowledge of that mountain changes your view, changes your voice, changes your choices. So why do we mistake confidence for knowledge?
Ignorance.
Yeah, ignorance.
I mean, I really think that it is. I mean, it could be overzealousness, but it's basically ignorance because we just don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, I think that overzealousness comes from ignorance. Because exactly that, you don't know what the risks are yet, or you're not aware the magnitude of the risks.
So how do you apply that in your day-to-day life when you come in contact with one of those loud experts? Do you trust them, especially talking media or politics? Do you trust them? I mean, I feel like the louder you are, the less I kind of trust you and more I back away because I'm like, I don't really think you have any clue what you're talking about.
The more time somebody says, do your own research on this, double check me on this, the more likely I am to trust what they're saying. The more confident someone is generally, the more I'm like, I'm going to take what you say with a grain of salt because you might not know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or you might know just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. I used to say that about my coding skills, like my web coding skills. I'm like, I know enough to get myself in trouble and not know how to fix it.
Yeah.
And that's where it ends.
You know, I would say that's an older saying and that I don't hear much anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Because nobody ever gets past the peak of Mount Stupid.
Well, not nobody. I mean, yeah.
Right. But the people who say that are on the way down the other side, generally.
They're in the valley of despair.
No, they haven't made it to the valley yet. They have just fallen off the cliff that is the peak of Mount Stupid. They're on their way down and they know it.
I'm sitting here thinking, sometimes that peak of Mount Stupid to the valley of despair, sometimes that takes a long time and sometimes that's a
click.
Yeah, that's
a drop and you hit the bottom and it hurts like everything.
Yeah, it's not always a cliff. You're right. Sometimes it is just a long sloping hill. I'm
just sitting here thinking of all of the different things and the different ways. I mean, let's talk about, raising kids. You get up there and especially when you're single and you've not had any children and you're watching somebody else, interact with their kids and you're thinking, my kids are not going to behave like this. This is not going to happen. And then you get there and probably with me, the first one.
And your kids are assholes.
Was probably your brother at a restaurant, your older brother at a restaurant. And he was an absolute heathen. I mean,
I would never do that.
That was the thing.
Truffle
You did get in trouble from that one time, but
that was at school.
That was
That's not a restaurant.
No, different thing. That was one of those deals where I thought, I'm never going out to eat with him again. I'm never going to, and so you do kind of crash with that. But there are other things about raising kids that's much slower that you sink into and you think, oh my gosh, how did I get here? And where is that at? And hopefully your dad and I are at the slope of enlightenment at this point with raising kids. But I mean, there's some variance there.
Being an uncle.
Do what?
That is why I love being an uncle. I love that I have a niece and a nephew and friends that have kids that look at me like an uncle, because when they're acting like a little turd, I can just pick them up and hand them back to their mom or dad and be like, okay, y'all have a good day. We'll see y'all later.
That's the slope of enlightenment, though.
That's so funny.
No, that is me refusing to climb the hill of Mount Stupid.
Mine is driving. I don't have kids, but mine is truly driving. And so I feel like I'm a pretty decent driver. I'm a pretty good driver. I do drive a little fast sometimes, like, okay, fine. But as I have become that much closer to people in the racing industry, the more I go, oh my God, I don't want to go that fast. I didn't know how to get out of that. I have no idea how that functions or works or serves you. So the more that I learn about all of that, just the industry in general, the more calmer I become in the car. And so now I just kind of tootle along like a grandma because I'm like, I don't want to get into some situation I can't get out of. And I don't trust anybody else on the road to not put me in there.
I think that's part of it, is that you now know that it's the other driver that can be the impact more so even than you do. So that, again, you've learned a little bit more about that. Your experience is there and you've learned a little bit.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, I've never seen you drive like a grandma, ever.
It's more
The
so now
older
than
I
ever
get,
before.
the
I'm on my
more
way
I
to the Valley of
drive.
Despair.
Yeah.
The older you get, Cole, what?
The more conservatively I drive.
You know what? I think when you drove as a Uber driver, it changed you a lot. And so I'm going to go back to this, is that I think then you also learned, you were on the road so much, you were dealing with personalities at that, and you did learn. And so you got calmer, definitely got calmer about driving when you were doing that. And I think it's
No.
because, no,
I've been on the phone with him plenty of times, and I'm not sure calm is the adjective I would use.
It depends.
Calmer.
If the people around me are driving like normal, sane people, everything is fine. If the people driving around me are intentionally trying to commit murder, I'm not as calm. And there seems to be a lot of that these days.
There is a lot of that these days, but I think you recognize that more than you
There's
did when
also
you
a
were
lot of
younger.
people who do 20 miles below the speed limit in the left lane, and
Or getting
I
on
would
an
like to
on-ramp.
drag them out of their car and beat them on the side of the road.
So, Cole mentioned a minute ago, changing gears, quite literally. Cole, you mentioned here a minute ago talking about loud experts and things like that, and talking about people who specifically say, hey, go check me on this, and how that draws in more confidence for you specifically in what it is that they're saying. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that because, number one, they know that they don't know it all. Number two, we can see that they've already peaked and valleyed off of Mount Stupid into the peak of enlightenment and are on their way. They're open to learning new stuff. They're open to being wrong. They're open to having a conversation about it to better understand what it is that they don't know, or where your confidence comes in here as well. But I want to kind of implement that same line of thinking to social media. So I am right there with you, Cole. The more, and I don't want to say like the less confident somebody is, but the more open-minded they are, the more likely I am to be curious about what it is that they're saying. Whereas if somebody just comes in and is like, this is the story, this is what happened, this is what the truth is, and isn't willing to listen to anything else, I certainly step back and I'm like,
You know, I see that you really like MJ.
mm-hmm.
That I think that's because you have seen her comment back and forth where somebody comes back and says, but wait a minute, did you think about X? And she'll go, yes, that's a valid point. Or yes, I did think about this. Or I may be wrong about this. And I will come back to you with that. And so it lends an air of confidence to her that you're willing to listen to, because she's been open. Like you say, she's been open about it, and
Yeah.
she's willing to say, I don't think I got that wrong,
But I could be. I could be
but
wrong.
I could be.
I think that's something that I have learned in my current role more than any other role, because it is so dependent on accuracy, that if somebody asks me a question, I will say, okay, I think it is this, but I'm not 100% on that. And then I will go and do the research and come back and say, okay, yes, it is this way. I have confirmed. Here's a source. Or, hey, I was wrong. don't use this answer, but here is a source that gives you the right answer.
So I'm going to go back and circle. Cole, is that unique to your job? And is that age, experience?
I think it probably is a little bit of both. I think it is probably, I don't know if I want to use the term exacerbated by my job, but maybe accentuated is a better term there, because in the industry that I work in, accuracy is so important. And there is such a significant amount of risk present in that job that makes accuracy that much more important. So to say, hey, it is this and be wrong is a million times worse to say, hey, I think it may be this, but let me go double check and we'll make sure.
Well, and I think that curiosity plays a big role in all of this. Like I said, that willingness to be wrong, but to go and figure it out before it's too late. So I think a sense of curiosity is really helpful and productive in climbing back up to that slope of enlightenment is part of it, to say, I'm not really sure. Let me check. Let me look into this that much more. Let me go double check that one more time. You know, it really truly is that old adage of measure twice, cut once, and being willing to do something multiple times before you make the investment of the cut. And so I just think that curiosity is really helpful at kind of deterring an overconfident situation so that you are measuring twice.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I was celebrating a win this week and ordering the parts for something that I've been wanting to build for a while. And I was able to do that this week in a span of a few hours because I had been researching this topic and the different parts for 5 years. So I was pretty confident in the things that I was ordering and I already knew where to look. And at the same time, I still went and asked someone who has much more experience for advice and to confirm, hey, this is what I'm looking at. Do you think this is a good idea? Do you know anything about this? And to be able to send that to someone and have confidence in their answers is really important. But to be able to do that yourself is a whole other thing and also really important. And I think that our innate impulsiveness oftentimes overrides that and gets us in trouble.
So I think that the other part of that kind of double-edged sword, if you will, is imposter syndrome. Not having enough confidence, even when you do know what it is that you're talking about or what you're up against. And I think that that becomes a really fine line to kind of toe and say, hey, I do know that this is true and accurate and real. I do know that this is what's best. I do know that this is what's right. And I'm confident enough to move forward with that. So going back to that kind of mental ability to be open-minded and to be wrong, I think helps balance your deal as you're walking the tightrope of imposter syndrome versus overconfidence. And I think that it's a really hard thing to balance.
Yeah. And I feel that pretty consistently in my role as well. I mean, I've been working towards a very specific goal at work for about the last year and a half. And as I gain more and more expertise in my field, the more and more, the closer I got to achieving that goal, the more I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Like, I don't know if I know enough to do this. And I think that to a certain extent that's healthy.
Yeah.
That caution is beneficial to a point. I think eventually you have to understand that, okay, I don't know everything, but that's okay.
Right.
Because I know enough to know what I don't know. And that, again, gives me some awareness to some of those actual potential risk, not perceived potential risk.
Well, and I think that there's something to be said of performative confidence, actually knowing your stuff and having the wherewithal to back it up versus just not wanting to look like an idiot, I think are two totally different things. And so I think that you've got to, especially internally, I think that you've got to know the difference. Fake it till you make it is one thing, but there's still a point where you can overly fake it. there's a point where it becomes
Oh,
not
yeah.
believable anymore, you know? And
And
so
dangerous.
and it becomes dangerous, sure. And so I think that we just kind of have to be introspective enough to say, hey, I know what I'm talking about. I am willing to keep moving forward on this, but I know that I don't know everything. You know, I've talked about Young House Love on this podcast before, and somebody asked them a question ages and ages and ages ago at this point that has always stuck with me. It's a home DIY account is what it was. And they said, how do you know when to DIY something versus when to hire it out? And John, the
It's a
husband, said
great
something.
question.
It is. It's a great question. He said something about we balance based on whether or not what the worst case scenario is. If the worst case scenario is that we're out several $100s, several $1,000s, whatever that may be, and that's the worst case scenario, let's try it. Let's give it a shot. If the worst case scenario is that our house burns down and all of our family members are killed, that's not a good worst case scenario to play with.
Yeah,
And so
that's not a risk you're willing to accept.
right. And so I think that you have to kind of be constantly taking feedback control of that constant analysis, weighing both of those measures, saying, hey, am I going to die? Am I going to die going skiing for the first time in 20 years? Is that worth it to me? And
Even if
No.
it's
it isn't for
even
you.
if it's not, am I going to die? If it's, am I going to sprain my ankle?
Yeah, I mean, but what happens next week if your ankle is sprained? If you're sitting here gearing up
Yeah.
for the Boston Marathon, it's probably
Yeah.
not a good idea to go screw around threatening to sprain your ankle.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
I'm past 30 now. If spraining my ankle is a significant risk, I'm probably not going to go do that thing.
Right. Like I said, that has always stuck with me, him talking about that balance of it all to say, hey, this is what I want to accomplish. But if the risk outweighs the reward, why would I risk that? I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
So as y'all have sat here, this is what's going through my head. Not so long ago, I would have been considered a computer expert in my office. If you were having trouble with something that you were doing online, you could call me and I could
Talk you through it. Fix it.
talk you through it, fix that, get you out of that dilemma, go on and do that. Now, especially with the two of you, because I think the two of you think that I'm up there on the peak of Mount Stupid. I do, because I don't think you ever saw that or, experienced that with me. But what you see now is I'm asking you what y'all consider really basic questions. How do I do this? How do I do that? Computer wise. And so I'm just in my mind, I'm thinking you've been seesawing back and forth on the Dunning-Kruger effect with the same scenario,
I
just
think it's
in different
different, though.
things.
The computers that you were an expert on, you excelled at, are vastly different than the computers we have today.
Agreed.
Well, and I think the other part of it is, Mom, we're at that age where we're also asking questions. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to work this. If you ask me to get on Snapchat right now, I might smack you. I don't have any interest in learning. I don't want to learn it. I don't want to know. I don't know how to do any of it. Leave me alone. And so I think that you're not the recipient of those questions, but we're still asking them.
Well, that could be true. I think part of what you're talking about is saturation too, because that's where I'm seeing it from. My scope is so much more narrow now than it used to be that I don't have all of the answers anymore. And there is some frustration with that along the way.
Well, it's all relative, though, because the computer systems and their capabilities now, relatively speaking, are so much larger of an arena. But when computers first started coming around, relatively speaking, it was the same. But because it's exponential growth, when you're going from a calculator and a notepad to Windows 98, capability of those two is vastly different.
The learning curve is real.
Yeah, you're talking about like a teacup versus a 5-gallon bucket. And
Yeah.
it's the same now, but just because it's expanding and accelerating exponentially, it's now a 5-gallon bucket compared to a swimming pool. And the relative change there is pretty close to being the same, but they're so vastly different that it's a lot harder to see it from that perspective, I feel like.
I think part of that for me though too is y'all's perspective. I knew that I was a computer guru and that I could make things work, and y'all didn't know that. And so you saw me on a different level of, let's say, the Dunning-Kruger than what I saw myself as.
I
And
think that that's always going to be the case. I don't think, because I don't know your lived experience, and I think you could apply it to anybody. I don't know what you know or don't know. All I know is what I think that you know. And even that can be skewed. Just because I think
Sure.
that you know this doesn't make it real.
Yeah, there's what I think you should know
Right.
and what you do know.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that we kind of have to, okay, now I'm going to loop this in, you guys, because I think that this is a big part of the conversation when we're talking about confidence. I think that we have to maintain a sense of humility in order to be successful experts at anything.
100%.
That's interesting.
And I think it goes back to exactly what Cole was talking about a few minutes ago. Go check me on this. Go confirm this for yourself. It's not because I don't know what it is, but I'm open to being wrong, new information coming out,
Learning more.
and being humbled by that more.
Yeah, let me give you this example. Let's say you're on YouTube and there are 2 channels that have tutorials on whatever subject it is that you're trying to learn how to do. And the first channel, the guy is cocky and arrogant and always acts like he knows what he's doing and treats people who don't like they're idiots, and he is right 5 out of 10 times. And then you have another guy who says, "Hey, I think I kind of know what I'm talking about, but you definitely want to go back and double check this." And he's right 2 out of 10 times, but 7 out of the other 10, he comes back and says, "Hey, I was wrong about this. Don't do it this way. Try it this way." Which of those 2 are you going to trust more?
Yeah.
Probably the second guy, because he's willing to admit his mistakes.
And he was only right the first time 20% of the time, and the other guy was right 50% of the time. But the other guy came back and said, "Hey, take this with a grain of salt first off." And then he also came back and followed it up and admitted, "Hey, I was wrong." That will get you really, really far a lot of the time.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think for so long and I say so long, I'm talking about in the last few decades specifically. But in the realm of today, I think that we have viewed humility as a weakness. And I think that we could do a better job at seeing it for the strength that it actually is.
I think a lot of that has to do with this fake it till you make it mentality
Mhm.
that has become so popular because it's successful a lot of the times. And it's
Yeah.
not real, but it benefits people all of the time.
Right.
And I think that there is still, to a degree, some merit to fake it till you make it.
And I don't disagree with
Sure.
that, but I think that we have decided as a society that humility is soft. The
Yeah.
act of being humble is soft, like a soft skill, a soft character trait, and soft skills are bad. And I don't think that that's true. I
would agree
certainly
completely.
I certainly don't think that that's as true as we like to make it out to be in our current culture.
I would agree.
I'll go there with you.
But especially if you're talking about like competitive environments.
Especially.
I
Yeah.
listened to an interview the other day with Simone Biles, and it's talking about her getting her start in gymnastics. And she had no idea she was going to be good at gymnastics. She did it because she thought it looked fun. She was in a gym by accident. They were supposed to go on a field trip and it started raining and it was all outside. And so they just like, well, what are we going to do with these kids? Stick them in the gym. And she's like, oh, that looks fun. I want to try it.
Really?
Oh, yeah, you should listen to it. It's fantastic. I'll send you a link. But it was so interesting. She never looked at anything with gymnastics and said, oh, I'm going to be great at this. She just kept going. She just kept pushing and kept going. And it was never this do or die situation. The interview I listened to is a couple years old. It was before the Paris Olympics, but she was never worried about anything until she actually got to the Olympics and got nervous about, she calls it the twisties. My body doesn't function the way that it's supposed to, and I'm not really sure why. They kind of call it the yips in baseball and things like that.
Yeah.
But she's like, I can't figure out why. I don't know. I can't remember how to do this. It's not sticking with me for whatever reason. And she kind of panicked because everybody started looking at her saying, you're letting America down. You're letting an entire country of people down. And she's had to work through that humility in her head going, I didn't let anybody down. And she went on a tour right after she came back from, I can't remember, wherever it was before Paris, I don't remember. And she only came home with a bronze, and she was devastated. And they had this like big tour around the country of people to come meet her and some of her other colleagues, and no one was disappointed in her. They
Yeah,
were
you're the
so
third best
happy.
at this in the whole world.
Yeah. And so putting that all into perspective, and again, I just go back to the humility of it all and the fake it till you make it. Like, that was one of the other things she talks about in this interview. She had a mental illness. That's what the twisties is. It truly is a mental block. And there's a mental illness and a mental component that comes with that. If you look at somebody whose leg is broken, you have a general concept of how long that takes to heal. And a prognosis that says, oh, it's going to take you 6 more weeks before you can stand on it. And after that, you have to learn how to walk again, whatever that may be. But mental illness, because of the stigma that we have placed on it, you can't see it. You don't understand the prognosis. The prognosis isn't real.
It's so nuanced.
It's so nuanced. So I'm not trying to say it's not real, but it's not specific. It's like grief has no timeline.
You have no idea how long it's going to last.
You have no idea how long it's going to last. And she became frustrated by that, because she's like, can we please fix this? I'm sitting here doing the work. I'm going to therapy. I'm doing all these things. Like, why isn't it getting better? And it took her a lot of time sitting down and answering to humility to say, this isn't a you thing. This isn't a weakness. And it was just so fascinating. And so I think that we would have a really hard time having a conversation about confidence, about experience, without discussing the positive attributes of humility.
I agree with that.
What do we talk about? Overcorrection. When you're wrong, are you good at saying, oh, shoot, I was wrong. Let me fix that. Or do you swing so far the other way? Oh, no, I wasn't wrong. I wasn't wrong. I didn't do that wrong. That's
Never
not how I
double down.
meant it. To what?
Never double down. Doubling down is only for blackjack.
It's a bad idea.
I think that varies with how you're feeling and what the situations are.
No,
No.
wrong is wrong.
I mean, yes, but I guess what I'm saying is sometimes it is easier to say I'm wrong than other times. That's what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
Regardless, easy doesn't have anything to do with it. It's doubling down
Still wrong.
is in a situation when you're wrong, being extra wrong
Doesn't make it better.
doesn't
Not a
fix
double
it.
negative situation here. So I'm really curious, and I haven't read a bunch of them, but I was reading something the other day about men being more prone to Dunning-Kruger moments than women. And there have been a few studies done about how men are more susceptible to being wrong, to existing on Mount Stupid.
On the mountain of stupidity.
Yes.
At least admitting to it.
At least admitting to it, yes.
I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic for this section.
You know, Boo, I was kind of thinking the same thing. This just looks like this is going to be trouble.
Yeah, this is a trap.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, I haven't read the studies, but Studies suggest that men tend to spend more time on Mount Stupid.
I mean, again,
Do they spend more time on Mount Stupid, or do they spend more time being aware of and admitting that they're on Mount Stupid?
I couldn't tell you. I haven't, like I said, I haven't read the studies. I just briefly saw one.
Okay, I'm gonna need a little bit more context on that one.
Fair enough.
okay, just to, take something that's stereotypical. Do men want to ask when they're lost?
Ask for directions or open up that piece of furniture that needs to be assembled, and we don't need the directions. We'll figure it out ourselves.
Well, I was going to say, is the driving
I'm
thing
a
still a
weirdo
thing?
like that. You better read the instruction manual. If you don't, I'm gonna thump you on the forehead and call you an idiot.
It's less time consuming to read the instructions and get it done right the first time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to know how the thing is supposed to work anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, Cal. I think that's a really loaded question. I'm with Cole. Let's mute our mics on that one.
I wasn't trying to put you guys on blast and turn you into some kind of sexist crazy people. I just was curious as to your take on it.
I don't really think men are more prone to that than women are. Maybe I'm full of it, but
Maybe you're just wrong.
I plead the fifth.
Okay.
Gosh. Okay.
Anywhere else you guys would like to go before we get into the weird thought?
I'm interested to see where this weird thought conversation is going to go.
So, hopping from one weird thought about whether or not men spend more time on Mount Stupid than women, let's go into our official weird thought of the episode. And this one came to us from Cole this week. And I'm very, very curious as to what you guys think.
Yeah.
Have you ever stopped to think about how bizarre it is that our brains just make drugs, like actual chemical cocktails, from adrenaline to dopamine to serotonin on demand? Imagine living in a permanent...
I mean, there's
Tons.
tons of different chemicals that our brains produce.
So imagine living on a permanent hit of adrenaline. Would you be unstoppable, ready to go? Or are you just a feral wild animal at that point? So
Well,
I
I
wanted
think
to talk about...
That's feral.
For one, I think your heart would probably eventually explode.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think it would take all that long. Like, I think existing, and you can talk to, like, especially war fighters, guys who have been in the shit for extended periods of time, like more than a couple of days, and it's gonna eventually your body is going to start to break down, even though your mind can't perceive it because it's under the influence of adrenaline. You're putting that tissue to so much stress.
Yeah.
Eventually something's going to start to fail, and you're not going to really be able to recognize that it's failing.
Right.
I'm just curious, where did this thought come from, Boo?
It comes from this book series that I'm reading right now. And basically, there is a guy who has been training to be a gunfighter for the last couple of years as kind of just like a hobby. And then the shit hits the fan, and he has to put those skills to actual use. And it's kind of him describing his experience of being high on adrenaline and how, like, it feels like time is moving slowly, and he's analyzing things more quickly than he normally would. And he is thinking through the process in such a different manner than he would not under the influence of adrenaline. And I was just kind of sitting there thinking about it while I was listening to it. And I was just like, it's really crazy that, I mean, your heart rate starts to go up and that adrenaline starts to pump, and how much it changes your thought process. Because you start to think differently, and it impacts different people differently. And so it just kind of sprouted with me sitting there, like, not really doing anything and letting my mind run. I'm like, man, it's really crazy that that's a naturally occurring drug that our bodies create, and how seriously impactful that is. I mean, it allows you to lift heavier weights, to run faster and run longer and breathe more efficiently. And you're just like, oh man. So you get to thinking about it, and then you start thinking about all of the other drugs that your brain makes. And I mean, that's just kind of where it came from.
Tiny, unpredictable pharmacists in our brains. But here's my next kind of question off of that. You know, they talk about especially moms who, when adrenaline hits them, can lift cars off of their children, right? So when you go to the gym and you work out really hard and lift more weights than you did before, you're sore the next day. Do you think those moms are sore?
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they have torn ligaments. In fact, I'm almost
Really?
certain that this is recorded science, that you're probably more prone to injuring yourself while high on adrenaline because it's harder for you to recognize the limitations of your physical body.
Interesting.
You don't feel pain as intensely.
Right.
So when you do hurt yourself, you're able to continue on, where without that influence, you would probably have stopped beforehand or not be able to continue. And that's
Right.
the reason adrenaline is there. It's to try and keep you alive, to allow you to surpass those governors that your brain has to stop you from injuring yourself. And that's the evolutionary reason for adrenaline.
I think of those military stories you hear about somebody and they're in the, in the thick of things, and then once it's all kind of calmed down, they realize that they've been shot, but they never recognize
Sometimes
that.
several times.
Yeah, but they didn't feel it. It didn't stop them. They just kept going.
Didn't hurt. Yeah.
I mean, I would tell you that if something critical is going on, if there's some kind of crisis, I'm great in that crisis, and then I'm going to fall apart completely
As soon as it's over.
When it's over, yeah, when the danger is gone, then I'm just going to be a little puddle of,
That
nerves.
is called a come down.
And so it, I would never have thought about this, but it is really interesting how many drugs your body actually does produce.
Naturally
It just
produces.
makes naturally by itself.
Weird thought.
Tying this
Yeah.
into kind of our conversation about confidence and the Dunning-Kruger effect, in that same book series, Cole, I'm a little bit ahead of you, or at least I was. I may not be anymore. But in kind of the next book or two, the same guy says something about all of the skills that they've learned, and they're working on like honing those skills much, much later. And so he said something, he's like, all of our skills that we've learned, they may be great in practice, but the moment that we go to apply them in a real world scenario where that adrenaline is pumping and everything, the best that we can count on is remembering 50% of our skills, 50% of what we learned.
I believe that.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense. And so I'm just kind of thinking about that here. Number one, being humble enough to say, hey, I'm not going to do exactly what I'm supposed to every single time, because I'm taking into consideration the unpredictable pharmacist in my brain, because I don't know what is exactly coming, because this is not a, what is it when they, like a planned thing, like it's out of control, out of your specific
Unexpected.
control, an unexpected scenario and things like that. And so I think that we just have to be, the more cognizant we can be of ourselves, of our actions, of the things that we do know and trust, and where those limits are, I think the better off we become, as long as we stay open-minded to growth.
Yeah.
New.
Because, I mean, your brain producing those drugs, producing those chemicals, doesn't physically change reality. It just changes how your brain is perceiving reality.
Right. That said, while our brains may be excellent unpredictable pharmacists in our heads, that does not mean I can go step into a pharmacy and actually put drugs together.
Also true.
You're on the mount of stupidity for that.
Yeah. And I know it. I am well aware. Okay, we need a good news story.
I love this one, just because this is about hospice, which is, the industry that I've been associated with for so many years. So this is about the 15th year in a row that the students at LP Quinn Elementary in Tupper Lake, New York, have combined their creativity and their heart, and they've raised over $13,000 this year for High Peaks Hospice. Okay, so for me, to get a bunch of kids, and this is pre-K kids through 5th grade, involved in something that you don't even think they would even have any concept of, raising money for a hospice, for an end of life kind of thing, is just fascinating to me. but I'm really excited. The first year, the pre-K kids collected pennies. That's what they did for their event. So each grade chooses what they want to do that year, and it could be a raffle, could be collecting loose coins,
Bake
lots of
sales,
bake
spirit
sales.
days, lemonade stands, whatever it is.
But then they come together and they all make this donation to High Peaks Hospice. And it's just such a cool story that indicates that it doesn't really matter how big you are or how old you are, you can contribute something of real value. And so I just thought it was such a great little story. And they've been doing it for 15 years. Yeah,
That's
it was a
awesome.
fun story. Go look up LP Quinn Elementary.
Very cool.
Yeah, I liked it.
Me too. Good chat today, guys. I love you both.
I
Me
love
too.
you guys too.